All right. So, real quick definition or understanding of what toxic masculinity is, and it's just a short, narrow, representative description of what manhood should be, where it should be defined by, you must be violent, and there's sex, and your status, and how aggressive are you? What makes you a man? It's a cultural ideal of what manliness is, where strength is everything and emotions are weak, where sex and brutality are what you're measured by. It's a range from emotional vulnerability to simply not being hypersexual makes you less of a man. And that's the problem right there, right? Is now if you imagine if I'm not a man, so I cannot understand this, but I have to be this thing to be a man. And that's the toxic masculinity, that if you are not this, then you are not a man. And it's like, but that's I just don't believe that. I just don't want to be that way. That's not who I am. And so that's where the toxicity comes from. Understanding that there's very little difference between the brains of men and women. There's very little. I swear to you, my husband and I will be sitting there and we'll see the same thing at the same time. It's bizarro. Like we're two of the same person. And I don't know if it's just been, hanging out long enough together or if we just happen to have a good connection. But we have the same brain waves or whatever, right? The same emotions and ideas and feelings. And it's because neither of us are trying to be, again, in a construct of what it must be to be a female or what it means to be a man, right? We just are existing as we are and enjoying each other's company. So people of different genders often act differently, not because of biological characteristics, but because of rigid societal norms created around femininity and masculinity. That's our problem. It's society. That's like truly, really our issue is what we do as society. Right. So it's not a biological characteristic. I am not born more feminine or masculine than any other female. It's society that decides whether or not I am more feminine or masculine, right? So society kind of screws us up. And why? Because we want to feel dominant over other people in some way, shape, or form. This is what human beings do. Some of us are like, hell yeah. And some of us are like, hold up, that's fucked up. Yeah, it is. It's actually fucked up. So when we're trying to utilize, again, these labels and these identities to dominate other people, this is where we're falling into the issue. It would be wonderful and lovely if we all saw each other as human beings versus a certain sex or a certain race or a certain social status or however it is. The world doesn't work that way. I think we are trying really hard. Humanity swings in pendulums, and I think as we swing one way this way, it comes all the way back this way. And at some point, I think it's going to do this. It's going to come back around, and maybe at some point, we'll have this moment of like, holy shit, I get it now. And understanding humanity as humanity. And it's surprisingly probably just going to, would be nice if it was that simple. But, if you look back at history and mankind as an existence, war will always take place, unfortunately. So we're always trying to find a reason to fight. All right. I believe I've talked about that before. If I haven't talked about that before, I will talk about it when we talk about the Crusades. And I don't think I've gotten there yet. Okay, so once we understand that and understanding gender dysphoria, one thing that I would like you to take a look at is Eddie Izzard, who's hands down one of my favorite comedians. One of my favorite stand up routines is from his 1999 Cake or Death stand up. Fantastic. And you're going to notice something about Eddie, who stands there in a kimono and makeup on. So we'll talk about Eddie in a little bit right after you take a look at the video. And maybe take a look at the article too if you want. You don't have to. This is something that I'm just going to kind of cover for you. But if you're curious to understand Eddie, it gives you a little bit more of an update. But one thing I've always appreciated Eddie was his openness about who he is as either a comedian or as somebody who dresses in drag and the progression of it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first and foremost, please take a look at Eddie Izzard in Cake or Death. And by the way, you will recognize him in certain movies like, what is it? Ocean's 11. He's been in, I think it's Ocean's 12 he's actually in. But you'll be like, oh, that's weird. Eddie dresses as a man in the movies, but as a female in comedy. We're going to address that in 1 second. But go ahead and enjoy him for a minute, and I'll be right back.